Okay, everybody, welcome back. Tutorial number 2. As you may have heard at the end of the last video, my family is now home, so we'll just work through this and we'll just see how it goes. So here are the pictures that I pulled off of Unsplash, and these will all work, and we'll kind of like work through them one by one. I'll probably do anywhere from 3 to 5 of these, showing some specific like techniques for some things that you might have. Some of these are going to be definitely in use for our video, for our parallax. Other ones that I pulled just so I could show you some specific techniques in Photoshop as far as getting your images separated. So let's get right into it. So I think let's start with this one. The reason I want to start with this one is because, one, it's a human. A lot of us are going to be keen on doing human things. This one is a little less parallax and a little bit more kind of just capturing that slow-mo style. Plus there's also some very specific things like the shadow, right? That's going to be something that we're going to need to handle, as well as the specific motion of how this goes across. So some of the stuff I'm going to do quite quickly. I don't want you guys to watch me tediously cutting out things. So this is going to be a little bit more kind of janky than perhaps I would expect quality work to be. But I do want to just kind of get through these so that we're tackling as many of the techniques as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and open this in Photoshop. And these images are going to be pretty decent size, like good enough for us to do the work with. As you can see, for all intents and purposes, this is it at 100%, which, this is a good, let me see how big this image is, 3,000 by 2,000 pixels, and that's definitely more than what we need, so that's good. So we're gonna do a couple things. We're gonna assess kind of where we're at as far as what we need to cut out and how we're gonna to space this stuff out. We might do a little bit of camera movement, which would be kind of fun. But then also we may want to include stuff or kind of exclude stuff. So we're just going to take a look at kind of how that goes. So this is how I start off. I make a layer from the background. And so now this is editable. What I do is I hit Control J or Command J and I make a copy right away and I turn off this back copy. The reason I always try to keep a copy of my original is because sometimes things get messed up to a certain degree that can be unrecoverable, and we don't want that. So I always keep kind of a safe copy. Maybe I'll even lock it down, and then sort of just a working copy, right? So let's just get right into it. First thing, let's just go ahead and cut out our guy, all right? And basically you can see there's some edging here. Like if I zoom way in, you'll see some pixelation, right? This is why you want the highest quality image you possibly can, because you're gonna get some of this like pixelation and stuff, and you want to try to avoid making too much of a mess of it. So I'm just gonna grab the pen tool, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna start from a certain point and just cut them out basically. And we're gonna do that using the Bezier handle. Now you can see that in this image there's been some sharpening done to the image, and that's okay. We'll just have to work with that. And you can tell there's been sharpening by like this black halo around the edge, and that's okay. That's stuff that's done by photographers in post to sort of like get that going. So anyways, I'm going to try to go quite quickly here. I always promise myself that I'm going to I'm going to do this really like fast and janky, and then like my OCD takes over every single time. I'm like I do it so laboriously and kind of like trying to like get every little nook and cranny and like command Z-ing stuff left and right. It's just all right. I'm just like, give me a break. Okay, so here we go, and then like here's his knee. So just watch out, don't get caught like kind of doing his whole back when you need to kind of cut out some of this part too. And his shoe. like I said, I keep saying I'm going to do this so fast, and then I just end up being so fastidious. Alright, this is looking pretty good. And then you're going to want to just watch out for those extra little details that pop out as you're doing this. Like the wheels here, just want to make sure you grab those. You try to do them the best you can, you know. It may not be perfect, but like I said, we're just doing this so quickly right now. So fast. It's like blinding speed how fast I'm doing this. And then a little bit of the wheel here. Again, right now I'm not too concerned about perfect, but let's just keep rolling along here. Ugh. Give me a break. Get really comfortable with your hand on the Command Z, because sometimes you're gonna draw a Bezier that's not gonna work out for the radius of your curves and stuff, and you'll just want to be able to undo it really quickly. So I kind of just rest my hands on Command Z as I'm going along. Some of this cutout stuff may end up looking a little bit better kind of as you're going along, and then later on you'll be like, oh man, I kind of messed that up. But don't worry about it. It'll all come out in the wash. Okay, I'm going to do these longer lines a little bit faster now that I've got the detail down. And so for one of these, I definitely want you to see the process of what the cutting out kind of looks like. We're going to use different techniques for cutting out stuff depending on your specific requirements for your images. So I want to show you multiple techniques for doing this. That being said, using the pen tool here is definitely like kind of the tried and true method of getting a really clean cutout. And it's mostly what we want to do. Every once in a while, we'll kind of leverage the power of the computer and the kind of the AI of subject selection to do some really specific stuff that otherwise may end up being way too laborious for us to do, and to some degree is actually done better by the computer than it is by us. So when that's the case, we definitely want to kind of make that happen. But for the most part, one of the reasons that we do this kind of stuff is you can see the extreme amount of shading and light difference that we're dealing with, and because we're doing like parts that are really lit, and maybe even like you can see the edge of his skin sort of blends in with the concrete, and then we go from this light part to this dark shadow even right here, and that's tricky for the computer to pick up. Like the computers will actually choke on that pretty hard a lot of times. Like this little halo we have around the front lit part of his skin. A computer is never going to be able to delineate that very well from the pavement below. So we sort of like need to make those decisions on our own. We'll kind of get a little rough around here. There's sometimes you can get away with doing stuff quickly, but when there's detail like this, especially like in the face and around this, you want to be pretty close to accurate. You don't want to get too loosey goosey with some of these features and stuff. That being said, I'm kind of going a little quickly, so just to get this done. And I want you to watch kind of one all the way through. Maybe what I'll do is by the time I get to the third or fourth picture, maybe I won't make you guys sit through this whole thing, this whole process again. But for right now, just kind of watch as you see kind of what it takes to use the handle and get stuff kind of where it needs to be. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, Mike, but we're going to try to get it at least close to workable here. A couple little bumps on the hat. This kind of level of like kind of attention to detail kind of will make things work out a little bit better when you're dealing with your overall picture. And then finally into your animation. Okay, we're almost done here. Kind of getting into the final stretch. Wrapping up some of this detail here. Getting to the ends of these fingers. There's a tree trimmer outside across the street, so I'm sure you guys are getting an earful of that right now. Sorry about that. But that's the way it is. Okay, that's good. Let's call it quits. All right, so basically, now we have this whole dude surrounded, okay? And what you're going to want to do is just simply, with your pen tool, just right-click here and hit Make a Selection. All right, the Make a Selection window will pop up. Feather, I recommend just stick with 0 for now. The reason you want to just stick with 0 is you don't want any feathering to make this softer unless it's soft, unless it's meant to be soft. Since this isn't meant to be soft at all, we just want to get it as crisp as possible. So I'm going to just go ahead and do this. Now, I usually like to cut out my images and make a hole. So I'm going to Command X this, okay? Or Control X for you PC users. And then I'm going to paste, all right? Now the reason we're still seeing this, guys, is because I have my underneath my safe layer turned on. So I'll turn it off and you'll see now here we have like a hole, right? And maybe what I can do for just visual purposes is maybe put a little like kind of green screen layer underneath it. You know, just to sort of, we can see kind of where that gap is. All right. So here's my skater. I'll go ahead and just put in skater. Start naming this. I've done all this work. Go ahead and please feel free to save your skater. We'll call it skater cutout or whatever, and we'll just save it as a PSD. So save your work from time to time. It's always a good idea. So we're going to put this guy right back where he belongs for the most part. And then what we'll do is we'll turn him off, and then we're going to work on his shadow next. All right. So we have this shadow here, and this is going to have to move along with him. So we're going to go through the same process of cutting out the shadow. I'll go ahead and just start from here. I'll make sure I'm working on my right layer, my correct layer. Now this shadow is going to be a little tricky. We're definitely going to want to cut out the shape, but then we'll show how to sort of composite this in After Effects so that you're getting the effect of the shadow and the shape of the shadow without seeing the concrete move. I know that we had seen some other things using shadow, and of course it ended up not looking ideal because of the texture of like the ground. So what we want to do is we kind of want to make sure we're taking the shape of the shadow away without really taking the concrete texture with it. But that's something we can handle later on in After Effects. So we don't have to worry too much about that. All right, I'll just come here, make this little loop right here. And the shadow, we definitely have a little bit of leeway, but you know, keeping some of this edging detail here will be helpful for selling the illusion of this being in motion. And as you can see, you know, there's going to be some things that are going to be problematic for us. One, we're not going to be really showing any wheels turning probably. So yeah, there's going to be some things that we'll just sort of gloss over here. Looks pretty good. This shape is going to go all the way kind of right to here, and don't be afraid to use a little bit of artistic license, if you will. I don't know what this little bulge here is, but that seems to be okay. And we'll go right here, and then we'll go up around this part of the shadow and come back through here. Alright, there you go. So we got the shadow cut out. So I'll just go ahead and do the same thing. Right click on the path, hit make a selection. Radius 0, I'll go ahead and Command X that again. Command V or Control V to paste it. I'll put it back where it belongs. And again, I'm not super concerned about it being exactly where it needs to be, just as long as, you know, we have what we need where we need it. Now the shadow does have a couple things that we may want to sort out. One, there being some gaps, right? Like here. We want that gap gone. So you can just make a selection and just delete it. Here's another little doodad. Delete that. Here's another one. Make a selection. Delete that. Delete that. And then another one over here. I mean, this one's not that big of a deal, but whatever. While we're at it. Delete. Okay, that's fine for the shadow. I'll go ahead and name this shadow, and I'll go ahead and Control or Command S. Save my work. Okay. And then for right now, we'll see what we got. Okay, so we got the skater separated and the shadow. Now let's go ahead and build out our scene from the gaps that we have. And there's a couple really great tools for doing this. I'm going to talk mostly about one of them, which is the clone stamping tool. There's the healing brush tool, which is pretty good. But for right now, we'll use the clone stamping tool, and we'll kind of try to build this scene out so it kind of makes sense for what we have going on. So we'll call this one BG background for one. What I might do is also separate this back part of the pool from this front part of the pool. See this nice line right here, the coping, if you will. Where this is a good opportunity to sort of get some parallax in the scene. So what I might do is separate this background from this kind of mid-ground plate, and maybe even soften this up even more than it already is. But we're still going to have to build it out, okay? So what we'll do is we'll build out this whole scene and then separate them later. So the clone stamp tool you can get to by tapping S or coming over here where the clone stamp tool is. And right now this is a little small for me, and I'm going to be working with such large areas that I'm going to pick like maybe a 200 pixel size brush. And the hardness I definitely want set to 0 for right now, okay? That means that the edges of the brush will be very feathered. So what I'm really looking for here is one, where there's texture I can borrow to fill in these holes, but then also certain lines that I can recreate to sort of sell the illusion of what's happening here. So let's just start down here at the bottom, and we'll start off with some simple stuff like just filling in the texture of this, where the shadow is. So what I'm going to do is by holding down Alt, you'll get this little target sign. This little target sign means source from this area. So what I'll do is I'll grab from like right here. So I just click that, Alt click there, and now you can see I have a little kind of moon crater following me of concrete. And so what I want to do is just start painting this in. And you'll see that little plus sign hopefully show up where this is sourcing it from. So what I'm doing is I'm just sort of painting over this area, trying to get a little bit of just, and you see I'm just constantly kind of sourcing from other areas to get this random feel a little bit. Right? So I'm just filling this in from local sources here. I'm just kind of painting along, Alt clicking, you know, where I want my source material to come from, getting this kind of like squared away. This is not looking bad, right? It's concrete, it's asphalt. It shouldn't get too much, shouldn't be too much of a hassle to get this stuff kind of squared away. And don't worry if you get any of these odd shapes showing up every now and then. What you want to really try to avoid, if you can, is too much like pattern stamping, right? You'll see this little like circle right here, and if I just go boom, 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 you'll notice it's like, okay, well now I see this odd cloning pattern, and it's something to try to avoid if you can. Try to keep your textures feeling as random as possible, and you do that just by sourcing from other areas. You know, you see these two lines right here, this line and this line. You can see that they're sort of there. So what I can do is just take some from here and kind of just cover it up a little bit, right? Just steal a little bit from certain areas. So I'm not copying huge swaths of surface area. You can see here I have this crater, right? Two spots. So I'm just going to steal some from here and kind of just cover that up. And this is just for stamping out kind of more larger kind of random swaths of stuff. Just so that you keep the texture looking somewhat random. And you can change the size of your brushes too, if you like. So there we go, right? Here's our shadow back, here's our skater back. And so now you can see that we're kind of getting this stuff going on. You know, maybe this area here is just a little too clean, right? A little too. So maybe I'll get a bigger brush here. I'll just kind of come in and kind of just lay that off. And don't worry. And you can also change the opacity down to like 50. So what I can do is I come here and blend some of this stuff in without doing like full on kind of like painting. Anyways, this is totally fine. Now you'll notice that I stopped right here where this edge of the shadow is, and the reason I did that is because I'm going to want to come in here and rebuild shadow, okay, this shadow of the lip. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be very hyper specific about where I drop this and kind of like, sorry, I'll go back to 100%, and kind of drop this in to create the effect of this shadow continuing on, right? I don't want this shadow to get cut off at the wrong place, and so what I'm going to do is try to build a little bit more of this out so that the shadow has the place to live where it belongs. And it's okay if you get these weird patterns, because we're still going to borrow from here to sort of like fill this in, right? And now we have all this. Now we at least have this line, and maybe the line isn't perfect, so what we'll do is we'll grab over here and kind of just feather that in, maybe make this a little bit smaller to sort of get a little bit of this. Again, that's too light, right? So it's like, well, let's borrow from this darker area and then blend it in maybe to this lighter area. Maybe this is a good place to kind of get a little blend action, just so that we're kind of achieving that effect. Maybe I take the opacity down a little bit and get a little bit smoother flow there. But this is plenty good, right? There's plenty enough. And then we have this inside shadow to build. So what we'll do is, again, we're just going to borrow some from maybe far away, because it's about the same, right? We're just kind of filling this reflection, which is probably coming off of the bounce, the light bounce. Basically, what you're looking at is someone's holding up a big silver mirror, kind of a big silver light bounce that's capturing the sun and illuminating the back of our skater. That's why his back right here is so lit. This light, this bounce light, is what professional photographers use to avoid getting harsh shadows in here. So what we're seeing right here is actually the reflective point of the bounce dish that's being shown right onto the skater. We just want to get rid of that. We do not need that nonsense in our shot. It's not part of the scene, and so we can just take some artistic license about how shaded this is going to feel, and kind of just go from there. So we're borrowing spots from other places. Again, this doesn't need to look perfect. Here we have another edging opportunity, so we're sort of like, okay, how are we going to kind of fill this in here, right? So I'm just being very subtle, kind of just feathering this in so that we end up hopefully getting like kind of a nice little swath of area here to move across where this guy used to be. So like by painting softly and not being too heavy-handed, I can hopefully get a more kind of accurate portrayal of what this coping, this edge might look like. So yeah, let's fill in the rest of this little dude. Again, I'm kind of a little bit more, I don't know, aggressive, if you will, like in the middle here. But what I really want is, like, when I get to this edging right here, when this edging comes along, I really want to be precise about laying that off kind of exactly where it needs to be. I can be a little expressive with it. Here, this edging over here, maybe I'll get a smaller brush size here, kind of fill in this little part right here. Again, this is fine. Okay, get a little edging there. This is looking pretty good. You know, maybe with this part right here, I can grab this, a little bit bigger brush. Changing the size of your brush helps you kind of like finesse things in. But you can see now I have this part, right? This line right here. So what I want to do is kind of like try to recreate that line, so that at least maybe it just gives us the idea that it's still kind of coming across. You may not be able to get this perfect. You're more than welcome to kind of try to nail that, depending on your specific image. But chances are you're just going to end up getting just too overwrought. So just, you know, try to nail it, but don't get too caught up in it, right? So you can see now, right, we're doing pretty well. We're just kind of getting this. You'll see some patterning, right? It's like pattern, 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 pattern. And it's like that's going to happen. So again, grab some, take 50% opacity, 70% opacity, grab some other place, and then just kind of like just give a little wash, okay? You can kind of eliminate some of this stampiness if you just give it a little like half opacity wash with your clone stamp tool. So that way you end up kind of not getting so stampy, right? So look at this stamp right here, here and here. They're identical, right? So what I'll do is I'll grab this part and just kind of like I don't know, just put a little bit of that on top, and you're like, oh, well, now that looks like another part. And it's like, oh, no worries, I'll just grab some, grab this and kind of maybe fill it up here a little higher. So, you know, just trying to keep it random looking without necessarily getting too fastidious about it. Okay, so then some other spots here that may require a little bit more finesse. You know, I'm kind of coming in here. I want to keep this line sort of as continuous as possible. May not be possible, but at least there's a representation here. And again, our skater's going to be over this, so I'm not uber concerned about it. And then for like really like kind of close up work, go ahead and take your brush down to like, you know, 50 or something. And then maybe what I can do is kind of, you can see I'm matching this up. Oh, I missed. So I'll take another stamp at it, and there we go. That's not bad. I could do it 1 pixel better. Trust me. don't get too hung up on it, even though here I am getting all hung up on it. So this is pretty good. I'll go about halfway, right? I'll get some of this, and you know, some of this is, don't worry, I'll fill that in later. You know, this is like, this isn't very good, so I'll kind of try to get this edging from all the way over here. And I'll try to like, you know, just meet them up a little bit. See how well we do there. You can see I'm getting a little bit of that ghosting up here. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Maybe you want a little bit of a seam here. Nope. A little bit of a seam here. And you can kind of like just fudge it as you're going. This is fine. Maybe if I want to get rid of this little gap right here, I can bring in some of this darker concrete, move that all along a little bit. Again, just kind of blending things in as I go. So this is looking fine. And then up here, you know, if the bottom part, you're feeling pretty good about that, we can just go ahead and cut out this bottom seam like we had talked about. So what I'll do is I'll just go back and grab my pen tool, and then I'll just go across the top part of this this coping right here. And then, you know, kind of try to cut that out as cleanly as possible. Again, you're not going to be doing this perfect, so we're just trying to get a nice kind of even trim across the top of this. Don't worry about the rest of that hole we got going on. We'll fix that. That's pretty good. Again, don't worry about that little gap right there. We'll get there. So we're just going to cut this out, come around this loop here a little bit. It's not bad. And then we'll go ahead and finish it up over here. Maybe that was a little too high. Okay, that's pretty good. So anyways, we're going to cut the rest of this out, and so all we really need to do is actually get down here, come back over here, and then connect this loop. Connect this loop, I said. No, geez Louise. Make a selection, and we'll go ahead and Control or Command X that one as well. Oh wait, gotta make sure you're on your background. Paste it back where it belongs. Okay, should lock right into place in Photoshop. And there we go. Right now we have this background going. So here basically is kind of like what we have as separate layers. So this is looking pretty good, right? Skater gone. Shadows there, but don't worry about that too much for now. But at least there's the skater on, off. And we got a pretty clean little bowl there, okay? So let's just finish up with this last little part, and that's basically our top background here. We're going to have to clean this up. Since we have that nice seam down here, I'm not too worried about what's below it, but again, this is just going to be more clone stamping. I'll go ahead and name this other layer that we did, maybe like front bowl or something like that, and then this background we'll have to do, again, similar to it, more clone stamping. So we'll get a bigger brush, again, up in the 200s is probably helpful here. I'll go ahead and grab this seam again, right, because I'm just trying to build this out on somewhere along the same lines that it already was, right? So maybe I'll source some from over here to kind of meet it in the middle. That's pretty good. Maybe went a little bit too far back to the left because I ended up sourcing that little seam from the from this little drop-in, but we don't want that, so I'm going to go ahead and scrub this out a little bit. Again, trying to keep some of this cleaner. Oh, it's a little dark there, right? I don't like that. So let me grab some of this lighter stuff and come along through here. That's pretty good. Grab some of this lighter stuff. No, lighter stuff. Kind of clean that up right here. Again, I'm not worried about this bottom part right here because this is all going to be underneath that other seam we already cut out from the coping before. So this is looking pretty good. It's not too stampy. It's pretty good. Here's this seam, right? So we're going to want to try to continue that little drop-in seam along. Try to blend it in with this a little bit. Just make sure it's not see-through. This is not ideal, so maybe we can build a little patch in there. This looks pretty good. And then maybe we just won't want to get rid of this guy altogether. Like, you know, like you don't belong there. You're not going to be moving in our scene, so it's like kind of like not really helping. That's pretty good. Probably get a little more out of him here. Gone. Yeah, maybe this part we can get a little bit of this. Again, don't worry about that, the kind of haloing and stuff. If you need to get super precise, just zoom in, get your clone stamp, get a little bit smaller size brush, and then you can kind of do this like a little bit more accurate work over here. And I was saying before, we're not worried about the bottom. Like, it doesn't matter that you have this like weird, crazy overhang, all this doodad, because what we're going to do is we're going to take this background. And then what's nice is that I'll kind of show you a little bit of mock-up here. We can have this front bowl now kind of move in parallax with the background. So the background, we can actually set down a little bit, and you can see that now we can have some slide across it, right? We can just have this slide a little bit, and then also we can have the front bowl slide a little bit more across it, and you can see that we won't have to reveal too much about it. So anyways, that's the idea. We'll go ahead and keep this at full resolution, but that's pretty much the long and short of it for that. We got the shadow, we got the skater. I'll go ahead and, instead of background, I'll call this back bowl, and we're pretty much done with that. I'll hit Command S, Control S to save. And this is pretty much set for animation. A lot of the compositing we'll end up doing in After Effects, so we're not too worried about that. But this is a pretty nice, clean little cutout, and you can see that we're able to build out that bowl pretty convincingly. And, you know, if you zoom in, you're like, oh, look at these little like patterns that are repeated. If you hate those, or if you're totally stuck up on those, just get back in here with the clone stamp. Go back to your front bowl, grab some of this, and be like, get out of here. You get out of here. I only want one of those chunks. This chunk's got to go. Right? Got to go. So anyways, you can come in and get as fastidious as you want with it, but you know, this is absolutely adequate for what we're doing. So just try to do this. Try to get to this kind of level of control with your cutouts, and then you should be in good shape. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to call this the end of, let's just call it tutorial 2A. I'm going to save this video, and then I'm going to make another one that we'll call tutorial 2B, in which I'll do the exact same thing, but I'm going to cut out a different picture, okay?